Hello, Retro Simmers. Welcome to West Anime Sims. My name is Calvin, and how are you doing? We are back with Through the Decades in The Sims 2. We are going to go back a little bit back to 2010s and build a 2010s inspired Hipster Bistro. So, if you like this video and like me to see, please give me a like and subscribe to West Anime Sims for more updates on Retro Sims content. Now we are on the road to reach 3,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Thank you so much for subscribing. It's so awesome that we just hit 2,000 subscribers last week. And yeah, let's keep moving forward. Retro Simming, the love of the Sims 1, 2, and 3 shall not end. Well, let's get back to the video. So initially, I thought I was going to retire this through the decades because we have run through 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s to our various community lots. I wanted to build a modern looking restaurant. In the end, I was thinking, why not we go a little bit crazier and trying to do a little bit of a 2010s version of a hipster kind of a bistro, which is like a throwback, a lot of very cafe style, a lot of very indie looking decor. That was all the rage in the 2010s. Yep, so that's how it this inspiration turned out. So what I'm thinking of is this really blocky build, and using the modern apartment style kind that I did previously and make it a little bit more different and have a block that lines up to the side and have a accent. It's kind of a very common thing to have in the 2010s. It's very blocky, very boxy with accents to the side or the top of the building. It is pretty geometric shape, very pretty boxy. It's kind of a thing. I don't really like it. Honest to God, really, because I am not a fan of modern builds, especially in the 21st century. Any kind of modern builds is just really not my vibe. But come to think of it, this retro fitting of 2010s is kind of a crazy thing. So it's very hipster, it's very focused on having black and white and with accents of green for all the potted plants. And it's a lot of potted plants as I look through inspiration in Google. And yeah, so it's really minimal with a little bit of a throwback. I can't believe we have hipster vibe is a throwback now. And it was all the rage back then, like 10-15 years ago, when people are really focused on having vintage looking decor, very halogen lamps, lights, and brass accents of materials like exposed brick, a little bit of industrial style borrowed into this architecture style. So I'm not totally mad about it because in terms of architecture, industrial is one of the modern architecture that I'm not particularly hate. So yeah, so it's very coffee shop like in the inside with a lot of small black and white tiles for flooring, poured cement in some of the places, especially on the outside, and then white brick all around and stone and poured plaster on the outside. But then I eventually changed it to a brick wall, which is white. So yeah, the color scheme wasn't particularly exciting. I don't know why we are so fixated on having these muted colors back in the day, and to the point that people nowadays call it a millennial grey. Gosh, I hate millennial grey. And I'm a millennial myself. And it's so blah. But anyways, so the hipster vibe kind of was, back then it was considered throwback because we looking through a lot of inspiration from the 50s, 60s, 70s to have people like to use old electronics or old technology as decor back then. It looks really people call it quite cool, and people like flannel shirts, and guys that then have man buns. So that was totally that kind of stereotypical vibe going on in the 2010s. People are going back to being more organic and being more retro, but I don't think it's really retro with all the black and white really dull. But black and white photography suddenly take a big interest back then, and people are going to so-called going a little bit more old style, but people are good. That's why I put in wooden tables instead of using plastic or glass. The outdoor ones going back inside, people are bringing nature back in, so to speak, but it's in a way that's not really natural, because people just hang flower pots and using fake ferns and plants, wall plants, to cover over the wall that I put in my one of the walls up there. And I use those platforms as planter boxes to give a little bit of a greenery on the outside. So yeah, not particularly exciting on the outside, but a lot of detailing with black and white as main themes, with accents of brown because of the wood. And surprisingly, this is something that people think it is really old. It is already out of fashion in nowadays, but some restaurants still have these kinds of styling, and as you can see nowadays, because people don't just completely demolish the whole thing and start all over in a turn of a decade. So definitely a lot of places you can see this kind of very vintage, very so-called very indie kind of a style. So people think this is really hip. Back then it wasn't. It was considered really cool, especially in the late 2000s. Actually, hipster fashion and hipster aesthetic is actually started in the late 2000s. Back then, I was quite of an in crowd that were thinking this is really cool. It is counterculture, anti-mainstream. We like the things that are not particularly popular. But then 2010s come along and anything indie is mainstream already, so it's not considered indie anymore. But still, people think indie music is considered very cool, very hip, very hipster. But in actuality, it's quite mainstream, and people in the fashion have throwback of 90s flannel, thick rim glasses, like trying to revive old technology back. And then at the same time, social media is starting to prop up, and people from all over the world actually use this kind of aesthetic, and it's really popular everywhere. And when I was designing this bistro, and I can't help but think architecture has been like downgraded since the turn of the 21st century, because it doesn't look particularly pleasing to me, because it's all very boxy, very straight edge, straight line, not a lot of colors. They use a lot of gray, which is pretty to me. And yeah, and everything has been turned to this type of building. It doesn't matter what kind of business it is. You go to the coffee shop, it looks something like this. You go to McDonald's also, it looks like this. So it doesn't look particularly different from anybody else. It looks, yeah, everybody. It's kind of ironic that hipster vibe used to be counterculture and used to want to stand out from the rest by not being in the mainstream. But when 2010s came along and made indie or hipster into a mainstream, everybody starts to follow suit, and it turns out everything looks the same. So I restructured a little bit of the build by adding half walls to give a little bit more height. A little bit of letterings in front. I just noticed it wasn't centered, but it doesn't matter. It looks pretty interesting to be a little bit off center. And put in some trees to give this build a little bit more interest, giving more color. My gosh, in looking or just blue, black, white, and grey is just so dull. And at the corner at back of the kitchen there, I put in like a employee's corner, like putting a bench, a garbage bin. Maybe staff needs to have a little bit of smoke break, and some seating towards employees to eat. So yeah, and a lot of just a simple restaurant layout back with the kitchen. Initially I put in the black and white tiles, and I changed it to the black marble brick. Whoa, it really changes the aesthetic, really looks to the vibe that I'm looking for. And putting LED lights. Apparently LED wasn't that popular in the 2000s. Try to imagine reuse or repurpose 2000s furniture in the 2010s aesthetic. It's kind of a challenge, because I want the things that it doesn't have in The Sims 2, because The Sims 2 ended in 2008. The most you can think of, it looks very late 2000s instead of late 2010s. Maybe some of the trends are still popular in the late 2000s, of the late 2000s carry over in the early 2010s. So it doesn't look a bit too far off. Hope you guys really think this is believable in that is for the 2010s. Looking back, 2010s wasn't that far off, and then people think everything of this aesthetic is kind of dated already, which is kind of interesting, because at the time when we are in the midst of the 2010s, people think this is really cool. We are throwing back to the old style, really repopularize old things again. When in actuality, it's kind of a modern take of the old stuff. It's kind of interesting that these fads come and go, and then we'll always come back to the certain things, elements that were once popular in 2 to 3 decades ago, and then people try to dig it back up and make it popular again, aesthetic wise. So it's pretty interesting. So nothing much of the 21st century is anything new. People are really big on throwbacks. People are very surprisingly into Y2K fashion, when that was like 20 years ago when it was popular back in when we were teenagers as a millennial. And yeah, I proudly profess as a millennial, I don't like sad beige, I don't like millennial grey, whatever color scheme that is the mainstream among my generation, I really don't like it. I like a little bit more rich colors. As you can see, a lot of my builds are really dark but rich, vibrant tone, like maroons, navy blues, dark greens. Those are kind of my style as I build mainly in Sims 2. So mainly I think 90s and late 90s and early 2000s is really my vibe, kind of a vibe. And I really like retro builds. I really like traditional builds, Victorian, traditional Asian builds that I have done a lot of in my around the world with the Sims 2 builds. And thank you so much. Some people actually give me a lot of ideas for around the world with the Sims 2. And I will feature them slowly one by one as I make a little bit more research to these builds. I want to take a break from building houses from different parts of the world and decide to build this one instead. And it's been a while I built a commercial lot, so I like to build commercial lots. It wasn't that popular in many Sims channels or even in Mod the Sims. Anyways, that is pretty much what I want to share about 2010's Hipster Bistro. What do you guys think? Please leave a comment. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe to West Anime Sims for more updates on retro Sims content. The link to download this build will be down in the description, as well as my social media channels, Instagram and Tumblr. Please do leave these social media channels a follow. Anyways, thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!